2:02 on Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. And I want to thank everyone for joining our virtual town hall meeting this afternoon. My name is Eshe Jackson, and I am Chair of the Probation Oversight Commission. Before I get into the purpose of today's meeting, I'd like to allow a couple minutes for each commissioner who are joining me as panelists for today's town hall to introduce themselves. And let's start with Commissioner Mundo.
Let me get on video, I'm sorry. I am Eduardo Mundo. I'm recently appointed and I'm at large.
Thank you, Eduardo, for being here. It looks like Commissioner or Vice Chair Kakani has joined us. We will allow her a couple minutes to introduce herself if needed.
Hi, sorry, trying to get my camera to work. Hi, I'm Melinda Kakani, she, her, hers, and I am the appointee for the 2nd District, Supervisor Holly Mitchell. Again, apologies for being late. Wasn't sure if there was anything else that I needed to add, but
No.
Excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for being here, Vice Chair Connie. And I think short and sweet is just fine. And so just so participants know, the purpose of today's meeting is to discuss recent inspections at Camp Page, Camp Offlerbaugh, and Dorothy Kirby, as well as Camp Scott. We're going to start today with Wendy, our Executive Director, briefly sharing the plan for today, along with some ground rules for participants. And then we'll proceed with some updates from Dr. Sarah Gongora, who is our Project Director. And we'll conclude today's town hall with some comments and questioners from commissioners and the public. And so I'll let Wendy kick things off with an explanation of how people can join or participate in today's meeting. Wendy.
Great. Thank you, Chair Jackson. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We are having this virtual town hall mostly because we ran out of time at our last Probation Oversight Commission meeting and weren't able to get to this agenda item. Yet there are some really important things to share about some of the inspections findings. Those of you, and Sarah will explain this in more detail, but the inspection process has become, in my opinion, the most important role of the Probation Oversight Commission over our 2.5 years of existence, in the sense that it gives an opportunity for experts, the 9 commissioners, to regularly visit the facilities and report back to the Board of Supervisors, most importantly, and also to the public about their findings. And those findings have brought up some of the most crucial pieces of information that have been impacting the department over the last couple of years. In particular, if you look at our 2022 inspections finding, Ismail did a search and the word contraband shows up 36 times in that report. So I think you'll see that there's a significant amount of important information that comes out of this. These inspections reports will be turned into written public documents that will be available to all of you and anyone who wants to read them, that will be presented to the board and will be submitted to the BSCC as is required by the Welfare and Institutions Code. But for now, we're just going to talk about the findings up to this point. I will say Dr. Gongora and I actually discussed the possibility of canceling or postponing today's meeting, given all of the other probation news out there, really challenging situations, of which, if you were to make a list of the 20 most important issues facing probation today, I'm not certain some of the things we're talking about today would make that list. And that doesn't mean they're not important. They're actually crucially important. Probation is just a complicated and very important agency within our county. And so we decided to go forward in the hopes that we could bring to light some of the issues that happen at the camp facilities that get significantly less attention than the juvenile halls, and also hopefully encourage the department to answer some of the questions and raise opportunities for the board to get involved to make important changes about day-to-day operational items, as well as about long-term big plans like the LA model. So this is not an official Probation Oversight Commission meeting. It's not governed by the Brown Act. You can see we only have 3 commissioners in attendance. We won't be taking any action today, and that's why we're able to hold the meeting virtually. We will have an official meeting on August 10th, and you all are invited to attend. You can participate in that virtually, but we will be in person at St. Anne's. If you want to participate today, based on how many people we have raised their hands to make comments, we'll adjust adjust how much time is available, but Chair Jackson has said we'll start with 2 minutes. The easiest way to do that is to use the raise your hand function. If you're on WebEx, it's the little hand icon at the bottom of the screen. If you're calling in on the phone, you dial *6 and that will raise your, you dial *3 and that will raise your hand in the queue. *3 raises your hand in the queue, and then you'll unmute yourself by dialing *6, but I will tell you that when we call on you by your number. We really want to invite you to attend and participate today in the public comment section. I also want to say that given everything that's in the air about the probation reform efforts and the probation oversight, we'd like to encourage people to make comments on what we have to report today. But if you want to talk about something else, you can go right ahead. And we'll be here until 3:30 and happy to listen to you share your information about this. We're not going to stop you for talking about something that's not directly on our presentation. Quiero dar una bienvenida a los que están con nosotros en esta reunión. Que prefieren hacer sus comentarios en español. Si le gustaría hacer un comentario, por favor, haga clic en la imagen de la mano que está en la parte baja de la pantalla. O si está escuchando por teléfono, presione *3 y eso levanta su mano. Si está viendo la conferencia en vivo por YouTube o Facebook, no vamos a tener interacción ahí, pero le podemos contestar después. Gracias, y si necesita traducción, yo le puedo ayudar. So we are streaming live, and also the video will be available later. Please feel free to share it. If you want to send us a public comment in writing, you can do so either with your name or anonymously, and we'll attach it to this meeting. It's info@poc.lacounty.gov. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. And I first want to just say thank you to the commissioners and Sarah and Jennifer who have led this effort in getting these inspections started. And I'm excited to hear the report today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Wendy. I really appreciate that. And of course, thank you to all the commissioners for doing this work and coming out to the facilities. It's been an exciting experience. So we are just about midway through the Probation Oversight Commission's 2023 annual inspections of all the probation detention facilities. And so again, as Chair Jackson said, we'll be talking today about the findings at Dorothy Kirby Center, Camp Scott, Camp Afflerbach, and Camp Page. And those inspections were completed in the months of May and June. We paused inspections in the month of July to, in part, allow the dust to settle as probation moved all of the youth with cases pending disposition out of Central and Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall and into the newly reopened Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. So again, this presentation is just a brief summary of the biggest takeaways we've had conducting these inspections, and we, again, will be releasing a written report. So to cut right to the chase, I think that what we have seen so far in the inspections is that there is a really serious need for systemic improvement. And that remains at the forefront kind of everything we observe. So how I am going to talk about our findings is I'm going to give some examples of situations that we observed or were reported, and then I'm going to tell you what I think that means and what the POC think that means. So just to start off, our first inspection was at the Dorothy Kirby Center in May. And on the day of our inspection, I think the most critical thing we learned was that youth had not physically been able to go to school in their classrooms for at least 25 days prior to that inspection. There was really major construction happening throughout the facility, and for things that are really desperately needed, like they're installing AC in the living units and fixing damaged roofing that has been leaking in the storms we had in the winter, right? And the construction resulted in these really huge manholes all over the campus that were covered with plywood and chain link fencing, and there were cones up for safety. I mean, overall, I think we had an easy enough time walking around the campus using the concrete walkway, but the construction was really substantial. It was reported to us that every morning there was a notification procedure that probation would email LACO and say whether or not there would be school movement. So what was happening during those days where youth weren't going to school in the actual school is that youth would be provided with some packets, and there would be teachers deployed to the living units to provide some instruction, except that at the school, youth would be combined into some classrooms. So on a daily basis, there weren't actually enough teachers to provide instruction in each living unit. And so that means that every day there were some youth not having live instruction. So we asked a lot of questions about what the planning had been around this and what the plan was moving forward. And really there was no clear path reported to ensuring that, from that point forward, youth would be able to get to school, or that everyone would at least get live instruction daily. So what that tells us systemically is that there is a lack of planning between probation and at least this co-located department. And there was also really a lack of creative problem solving just to overcome the challenge. Okay, so next I want to talk about LA model implementation. So before we headed out to the inspections in the Eastern camps, and those happened in June. So we went to Camp Athlorbaugh and Camp Page. The POC was really hoping to learn about what was happening with the installation and implementation of LA model expansion, because it was called for in a prior board motion in March 2022. There was a motion called Preparing for the Closure of Division of Juvenile Justice, Secure Youth Track Facility Designation, and LA model expansion, right? And within that, it was said that LA model there was to be planning around the expansion of LA model to those two camps. So when we arrived at the camps, we inquired about the implementation and what was happening there. And it was reported that, no trainings for the LA model had occurred, and there was really no current plan for implementation underway. We also came across concerns that some believed that the LA model couldn't be implemented due to the physical layout of the facility. There was a lot of focus about the small group model really needing to happen for LA model training to be effective, right? And so this stalled progress, I think systemically speaks to the trouble the department has had historically with, following through with some of those plans, and also the continued need to address both culture in each facility and just the training needs throughout the department. Every time we go out and speak to staff, we repeatedly hear that there's desire for coaching, training, and that just seems to have stalled. There were highlights in the inspections, and a lot of that centered around relationships that adults had formed with youth. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in detail. And I want folks to understand that we can start to see a pattern, right? That there are these really great things happening at the level of individuals, right? The choices and actions of individuals, which are not necessarily like a system-wide supported practice, right? So we came across some information that some youth were having really great experiences with programming. And we would ask them a little bit more about the programming or what the experience was. And I kid you not, no matter what the providing department or agency was or what the program was providing, youth consistently interviewed. They highlighted their favorite programming experiences within the context of having an adult who was forming really strong, positive relationships with them, and that it seemed to be people that the youth could relate to. So I think we have all heard the saying, kids aren't going to care until they know you care. And that really came across, I think, in a lot of the interviews with youth. We heard a lot of diversity at the interviews with youth from facility to facility about which providers were the favorites. And it consistently came down to that provider's ability to form and maintain their relationship with the youth. So we definitely heard in interviews that youth had some positive experiences with their probation officers, some of whom, we observed and also heard about constantly doing that de-escalation work, and some folks that are really working with youth from a strength-based perspective. Like we heard an example from some girls who talked about receiving a creative writing assignment as a way to explore their overuse of curse words, or that some staff would help youth pull away from an escalating situation by giving them like a special assignment away from the rest of the group. And even some staff who would try to help youth. This one youth talked about a staff that he had who would try to ask him to think deeply about why he might be reacting with anger to a situation. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we heard from quite a few youth who said staff overemphasized compliance or consequences. And some youth reported that they were regularly told that like staff were waiting to write an SIR on them, right? So the attitudes and practices of the officers working face-to-face with youth seem to depend entirely on the will of the individual rather than like system-wide standards of how to approach the work. During our inspections, contraband, safety, and substance use were consistently examined and asked about, but there were no major complaints this time around, at least in these 4 facilities. We, are still only midway through. There were some observations about the procedures to enter the facilities, not having a lot of security up front. But again, we will be reporting more details on these findings that will come out in our report. And we'll be pushing forward with conducting inspections for the rest of the facilities in the coming months with Campus Kilpatrick coming up next. So I look forward to hearing all of the public comment, hearing everybody's ideas about not only improving these 4 facilities, but also, again, any comments that you may have about anything going on in probation's detention facilities. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening.
Sarah, for your presentation. I'd like to open the floor, the stage to both commissioners, Vice Chair Kakani and Commissioner Mundo, to share remarks about their experience with experiences. Commissioner Mundo, why don't you start?
Thank you. So I was involved in all 4, well, actually 3 of the camps inspections, and it was good to be at Camp Scott. I was supervisor to some of the staff were there, and I was happy to see that the young ladies that were supervised there were really happy and engaged with those staff. The majority of those staff actually were trained in the DBT back when they were at the original Camp Scott, and it really was nice to see that they were still implementing and still acting with that training. And you saw it. You saw how comfortable the young women were there. They spoke highly of the one staff that was taking the extra effort to bring in crafts and to hold them accountable for the foul language. That was really neat to see. Overall though, it's really disturbing to see the lack of education, not just because of the difficulty of it, but also because we understand that it's a difficult population. We know it, and it's a population that's been served for decades, and for it not to be at a level that you would expect from something that's been going on for so long was disappointing. It's almost like everybody's lowering their expectations to the lowest denominator and not really challenging these kids to be able to concentrate beyond a 15-minute period, and having full-blown lesson plans that require the full amount of time. And the idea that at Kirby that they weren't able to overcome the challenges of the construction, at least for half the students maybe, that's disappointing. And but it was nice even at Camp Page, seeing that there are real relationships with the youth and the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Mundo, for those remarks. Commissioner Kakani?
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I unfortunately only had the opportunity to visit Camp Page as part of the inspection process. And while young folks would point out the staff that they felt like deeply connected to, the folks who made them smile, the folks who made them feel safe, the folks who they experience like some level of consistency with, by and large, what I observed that day was nothing short of tragic. Like we have these young folks who are confined. You know, their movement is certainly restricted. And half of their day is spent in a classroom where all of them acknowledged that they did not learn anything. You know, we talk about unit school or packets as if that's like an anomaly, and that's what happens when young folks don't get to leave their units, to leave, you know, where it is that they sleep. But what I saw, in fact, was that what happens in the classroom is no different than packets. It's just on a computer. You know, I had no idea that that's what education looked like. It's literally, you know, based on whatever units you have to get done. Here are some assignments that are assigned to you in the form of worksheets that you're reading independently, that you're answering questions to independently. If you have a question, maybe you'll ask the teacher, but there is no like opportunity to learn from each other, to learn with each other. I mean, all of those young folks shared that they weren't really learning anything, even when they went to the classroom. And what we did see at Camp Page, which was wildly frustrating, they kind of like switched classes halfway through the day. And prior to like starting class in the second classroom, I think a teacher had lost their cell phone charger. And I think this is at the time when cell phones were prohibited. So for whatever reason, this teacher had their cell phone and had their cell phone charger with them. And it was missing. And I think there was some concern about young folks having stolen it, using it to charge vape pens, contraband, whatever it is. And so prior to instruction, and I use that term very loosely because there wasn't any actual real instruction happening, every single young person in that class was searched. And you could tell how like visibly agitated they were. I sat with them at lunch. They were I know they were thoughtful, they were insightful, they were frustrated. Many of them did not eat anything until they got snack at like 10 p.m., which was a chocolate chip cookie. So, but that's a separate issue. But yeah, they showed up in this classroom and they walked into being searched. And then the expectation was like, okay, now that you've been searched and now that we haven't found anything, you're going to sit down and learn. I've got two kids who are, you know, for the most part, pretty like regulated kids. They haven't dealt with a ton of trauma. Like they've got it okay. And I can't imagine them after having been dysregulated, kind of like violated, invaded in that way, just like immediately shifting to the next task. And there was like no one there to acknowledge like what that does to a young person's like insides. And like that's kind of, it felt like how the day played out. And we talked to young folks after they returned to the I guess to their room, like where they sleep, and like there's this tiny day room. There wasn't much happening there. And they all talk about the role of like incident reports, and they all talk about the fact how it's like constantly held over their heads, constantly like a threat, constantly like, well, if you look to the left, I'm gonna write you up. If you don't listen to X, I'm going to write you up. And so it's like this constant, like, I don't know, like, I'm not sure what the intent is. I imagine it's to control, but it certainly doesn't build trust. It doesn't build anything that resembles like rehabilitation or like mentorship or solid relationships. And so there was a lot of frustration from young folks who just, I don't know, just felt like they were left to like twiddle their thumbs for far too long in a day. And if they didn't twiddle their thumbs the right way, they'd be punished for it. So sorry, that was a long kind of takeaway from what I saw, but it was really unfortunate that we weren't doing more for these young folks so that when they left after 6 months, 9 months, they actually had the opportunity to succeed.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Connie. Were there any highlights?
Like I said, I mean, I think like the few relationships that I got to see with young folks was like with a few of the staff was like really wonderful and profound. There was a period of like rec where the young folks were playing volleyball, and like I just don't feel like they get to be kids often enough, but it was like that moment where you got to see them be kids. And it ended up resulting in a fight and someone got written up because someone looked at someone the wrong way, which is unfortunate that like it ended that way. But for much of what I watched, it was just like laughter and like just like kids being kids. And I wish there was like a way to support that in a way where, you know, there wasn't like a write up hanging over your head, that young folks were given the tools to deal with like being taunted or being teased, so that it wouldn't devolve. But it was, yeah, like a really sweet moment of just like laughter.
That's really nice to hear. You know, I think that the micro actions definitely have like they're positive contributions to culture, but I definitely don't think that they can compete with all the systemic issues that Sarah talked about. And so what's funny to me is that I've been participating in the inspections from day one, and the reportings or the findings are really not changing. They look different, but the source of the issue, the core issues, they remain the same. And so I guess with you and Commissioner Mundo being, you know, newer commissioners, you guys are first in the audience and now you're on the panel. What real possibilities for change do you guys foresee? I mean, realistically, right? Because we're doing these inspections, we're an oversight body. There are lots of limitations, but I do think there's some opportunity. And so where is it? In your opinion?
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Mundo. Did you want to jump in? Did you have some?
Go ahead first.
Okay. I was just thinking, you know, like Camps Page and Afflerbach and Rocky are like, I don't know, not really walking distance, but like walking distance to the Pomona colleges, right? Where there are young folks who I imagine would like be thrilled to like give their time and build relationships with these young folks. I know that there's a group of young folks that I've worked with before, who I think are at Claremont. I think they're actually at Claremont McKenna and Pomona, who really do care about conditions of incarceration. And so like, there's just far too many hours in a day that these young folks have nothing to do, like absolutely nothing. And I don't know, I'm just like, why isn't there like a soccer program? Like, why isn't the girls soccer team at like Pomona College coming over here and doing drills like, I don't know, 3 times a week and like building up a soccer team? I don't know how you like make a carceral facility better, but I think like giving folks the access to their families on a more regular basis. That felt like one, you know, it was oftentimes like, oh, we get like 15-minute phone calls once a week. And then if we mess up or we get a write up, those get taken away. And that's like our only out. Like that's our only way to talk to people on the outside. So maintaining that connection with family, but also like building relationships with other folks feels really important, and starting to like shift power and culture such that it doesn't solely rest with probation staff. Because I don't know. I mean, all of the probation staff that I had the opportunity to speak with were pretty miserable, and were frustrated, were fed up, whatever it was. Maybe there were 2 who were like happy to be there, but the rest were like, I'm exhausted. So I think like really having other folks be there. And then the other thing, sorry, I just wanted to lift up is the young folks who graduate from high school and then have access to Mission College is I I don't know how else to articulate it, but it's a bit of a joke. I think they have like some sort of actual instruction, maybe twice a week, only for like an hour. And then I think, and there are classes that actually have nothing to do with like basic requirements that would allow you to transfer to a four-year university if you wanted to. Maybe some of them at some point, but like what was it? It was like entrepreneurship or something like that, that I don't think is connected to like any basic requirements that like a community college would offer you so that you could then transfer to a four-year university. And it was one class. So one class, and then I think the other 2 days a week, they get to go and like do some work for a short period of time. But I don't know why it is that like we don't get those young, like I talked about bringing, young folks from Pomona, Claremont, McKenna, Harvey Mudd, Scripps, whatever it is, out to those facilities. But I don't get why there is no way for us to take those young folks to Claremont, McKenna, Pomona, Scripps, and those institutions. Like it doesn't make sense to me that we don't create that opportunity. So yeah, those are just a few things that come to mind.
That was great. Thank you. Commissioner Mundo?
It's a really interesting time. We're coming off of the restrictions of COVID, which really disrupted everybody's life, not just the juvenile justice system, but the regular educational system. You have a department that's dealing with the crisis at the detention level that's really affecting all of its programming. You've had numerous changes in leadership, and I think that there's a lot of energy to harness at the line level, and they're not really being heard. They don't know where to speak out without feeling any feeling of retribution that might come against them. I just think that at this point, I used to say that for 30 years, I would say that the department was always an inch away from greatness or an inch away from disaster. I've always felt that. I always thought there was so much good that it was close. And after retirement, I realized that was wrong. I think the staff and the line and the line managers are an inch away from greatness. But I think mid-management is not only flirting with disaster all the time, but they create it. And just knowing that there are staff out there that want to engage in the process and want to have a say in how camps are run is the positive side. I think once we stabilize the halls, then maybe we can stabilize the educational system in the camps, because one of the things that I learned at both camps is that they're having a difficult time getting substitutes because of the crisis in the halls. They're having a hard time getting staff refilling spots in the camps. I just think that the challenges are so deep right now that the one positive thing is that there is a line staff and a line management component that if they're able to engage more and express more of the challenges and express what they want, because they are asking for training. And I don't know how disruptive training was the last 3 years because of COVID. That's a lifetime, and the way the camps have changed and the way the youth have changed and the workforce has changed in the last 3-4 years. It's half a decade. So I think that the light in the end of the tunnel really rests with harnessing the energy and the of the staff and line management.
I agree with that, but that would be, the responsibility of middle management. I think I could also agree that that's where the point of failure lies. I'd like to open the floor to public commenters, and then commissioners, we can revisit any questions or comments at a later time, or after public comment. Wendy, can you facilitate public comment for us?
Absolutely. And I'd also add, Chair Jackson, if people want to ask questions of Sarah or of the commissioners, they can certainly do so, since this isn't a formal public comment period, and we can respond if you choose to. So I can see some people have already figured it out. Click on the little raise your hand button, the little hand icon at the bottom, or dial *3 from your phone. Oprime clic en la manita que está abajo de su pantalla, o oprime el número 3, estrella 3, star 3. I said it correctly in Spanish and not in English. *3 on your phone, and that'll raise your hand. And we will start with we'll start with a 2-minute clock, and happy to let people speak again if we have additional time. We're here until 3:30. So we'll start with Jenny Barra. Jenny, we're going to unmute you. And did we just lose Jenny? Janae? That was weird. She just popped off my screen. Let's go to Karen Taylor first, and then we'll come back to Jenny in a second. Oh, Janae's working as fast as I'm talking. Janae, why don't you tell me who you want to unclick on first, and we'll start.
I'll go ahead and unmute Jenny.
Okay, Jenny Ibarra.
Hello. Hi, thank you. So I just wanted to ask, essentially, what is the plan for the workforce development that comes after these kids leave the facilities? As you know, they're not going to be traditional kids. They're not going to, fit in a traditional sense. Not everyone goes to college. Not everyone has to go to college. I guess my question is, do you folks have programs coming in to the facilities to kind of let them know that there's alternatives? For example, I work for Winter, which is women in non-traditional employment roles, and we offer free job training and job placement for women wanting to get into union construction. So are alternative careers being offered to these kids that maybe they have not been offered before? So yes, that is my only comment I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Millie or Eduardo or Sarah, did you hear anything about workforce development at the camps?
I can share. The only thing that I did, not in any like meaningful, like thought out, well structured way. The only thing that I saw at Camp Page was it was like a digital art class, and it was like actually the one spot. I'm sorry, that was a total blow or like a highlight. It was like the one spot where like young folks were truly excited about what they were creating, which was like just beautiful art. And using kind of technology to enhance that art. And I don't know how that lent itself to workforce development, if there were kind of opportunities that were connected to that after leaving. But I don't, yeah, I didn't see or hear anything. And that's like, and even the digital art class was like a possibility. I don't know that was really connected to workforce development. So none of the programming I saw was connected to that. I don't think the instruction, the LACO instruction or the Mission College instruction was at all connected to that. So I don't think so. But maybe Commissioner Lindo. Yeah.
I can make a few comments to that. Sorry, Millie. So at Dorothy Kirby Center, we didn't have the opportunity to observe it, but I believe on the programming calendar we received, there were a couple of workforce type development programs happening. So one of them was like an OSHA certification and training class that was happening. Another was, and again, we didn't get to observe this, so I don't want to misspeak, and anybody feel free to correct me. I believe there was like a partnership with LA Trade Tech where somebody was coming. There is a car on the campus of Dorothy Kirby Center where certain youth come into the program. I believe it's a certain number of weeks. I want to say it's 6. And there's an opportunity to learn some of the mechanics there. And then at Camp Afflerbaugh, we did have the opportunity to see one really outstanding program that relates really closely to workforce development. And I guess I'll just name it. Homeboy Industries was there, I guess through Homeboy Arts maybe, and they were doing a silk screening class. And during that class, the provider was really giving pointed direction to the 3 youth and that were participating and telling them, you can take these skills when you get out, you can come to Homeboy and you can apply to work there, like have gainful employment there once you've passed through this program. And he was also giving them some other tips and guidance about if they decided to go a different route and do, silk screening through some other place, that they would be happy to continue the learning and just be supportive of that. And we're really translating the activities of the day into how they could be applied to gainful employment in the future. I definitely saw that and heard that being highlighted. So I would say from what we saw, largely, those were the direct examples of workforce development. But, because we only get to be there one day and it's really only one afternoon, you kind of, depending on the facility, have to like hop around to catch what programming is happening. But we are definitely interested in that.
I'll just add, thank you for the question, Jenny. And obviously workforce development is applicable to high school age students, which are most of the youth who are at the camps where these inspections were completed. But our upcoming inspections at Campus Kilpatrick and Barry J. Nydorf, and also Los Padrinos actually have many older young people, including young people that are 18 and older, for whom workforce development is key, of course. So definitely something we'll keep our eye on in future inspections. Let's go to Karen Taylor. Go ahead, Karen.
Heavy heart to all that I've been hearing. We've been working in the camps and halls since 2015, originally through LACO and a little bit now through the Arts for Healing and Justice Network. And, I know the power of creative and arts and community-based programs doing some of this work to really fully engage the youth in arts programming like Homeboy Industries. We'd love for Right Girl to be able to be more widely represented, helping with creative writing and job skills and confidence. You probably know our most famous alum, Amanda Gorman, who, has come through the Bright Girl program for 4 or 5 years and now takes to the world stage with her poetry. And while not everybody can become Amanda, we know that we can help young people have the hope for their future, the positivity, the confidence, the engaging communication skills they need for whatever career they're going to pursue. And we're just having a little bit of a challenge getting more widely brought into the facilities. We worked through LACO originally for years, and the turnover of staff there was just so high we couldn't sort of maintain the connection to get another contract. We're now with AHJN, but we're just struggling with how can we do more. We want to help these young people that are incarcerated, also the ones that are, before they get there and after they've come out. So, it's just been challenging for us to find our way to be able to be in front of these youth, but we have powerful writing mentors who are ready to be of service, who are on our staff as trained teaching artists in healing informed and trauma informed strategies. And I'm sort of surprised that we're not used more. Like, please, can we just be helping? Because these youth need so much more than the probation staff can offer, as we can hear.
Thank you for that, Karen. And, both Winter and Right Girl, of course, are longtime Los Angeles-based organizations. So I hope we have some folks listening, and we're happy to help you connect. If you can contact us after the meeting. We're going to go to a call-in user. Yes.
Wendy, really quickly, where did we leave off with probation? And our, I don't know if we submitted a request, but we wanted to ask about their contracting practices. Where did we leave off with that?
So they actually responded comprehensively with a list of all of the existing contracts for anything, including community-based organizations and things as big contracts like their Apple One temporary employee contract and the placement program contracts that they have for youth who are in placement. So we did receive a complete list of that, including the funding source. We certainly could request additional like updates to that, but I don't want to speak for any of the organizations who have spoken today, but there are many organizations that don't have contracts. They're actually not paid, or at least not paid through probation to do this work. Sometimes they may be paid through another county agency to do the work, but their agreement with probation is an MOU rather than a contract to provide services. So we have definitely talked about what we officially call the Programs and Services Inventory. And we did not receive that as requested from the department of all the programs and services that were being offered in the facilities. But I can say that Sarah and our team, Jennifer and Belinda especially, are in the process of actually compiling the programs and services inventory ourselves, and reaching out to all those providers who are providing or wish to be providing services within the facility, like the people on the list, basically, to get a sense of their challenges and positive experiences in the halls and camps, and what they're able to offer, what they're not able to offer, how often they're able to offer it. So that's something we will be sharing with you all, the commissioners and the public, shortly.
And thank you so much, Wendy. Sarah, really quickly, based on the inspections that you've done, what would be the rough percentage of programming that's offered that's actually provided?
I'm going to say that's a little bit hard to say. We found at a couple of facilities, at times there were things scheduled that weren't necessarily happening. But then in the follow-up, or, if we're looking for it at 3 o'clock and it wasn't happening, some of the times it ended up happening later, or things were happening in a different place than where it was said. I think there's some issues with the calendars, the ones that we've received and the ones we get in the inspections. So it's kind of a hard call because I feel like those have not been super updated, which is why we're trying to put together this inventory so I could answer a question like that. It's just very hard for me to say with a lot of confidence.
That's fair. I actually expected an answer like that. I just wanted to get an update.
I'll say we have also seen times when programs arrive and are not able to provide their programming at the facilities because of safety considerations and staffing concerns. And we have seen the opposite, where programs are scheduled and the program providers don't arrive. That was particularly true during post-COVID times, I guess, but it continues to be true now and is frustrating to probation and the youth, of course. So that's why we were hoping to have these detailed calendars to be able to audit how often those provide. And we have received some calendars and from some facilities, but not regular calendars from all the facilities.
Thank you, Wendy. We can proceed with public comment.
Sure. Okay, we'll go to call-in user number 5. Your number starts with 562940, and just dial *6 when you get the notification, and you can unmute yourself. Janae, were you able to unmute them before they lowered their hand?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, it's call-in user number 5, if you can go back to the participant list.
I think they
Hello?
dropped the call.
Yes. Okay, great.
My number does not start with 562.
Nope, it doesn't. It starts with 626, but you can speak now anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was curious, having spent 40 years with the department and recently retired, the commissioners who did the site visits, first of all, somebody who spent time with the department listening in, it's curious that a couple of commissioners see one thing and one commissioner sees something different. So it speaks to the fact that people see different things when they want to for whatever their purpose is. Secondly, training. I hear a lot about training. And it was my experience, and I think Mundo can testify to this, that a lot of staff see training as an opportunity to get away from the job. So I think there also has to be a concentration on the type of training. it's got to be meaningful training. And I really encourage commissioners to take a look at putting the training in the facilities and not off-site, because once it gets off-site, it goes in a whole different direction typically. And I understand staff's need to sometimes vent in a classroom, whether it's in Pico Rivera or wherever it is, in an off-site setting, and vent and all, and that is healthy, I'm sure. But to really, if you're going to talk as if training is this potion for curing things, then it has to be meaningful training, number one, and it's probably more beneficial that the training's on site. And I'm also wondering if the commissioners see a discernible difference between a camp setting and a detention setting. I'd be very interested to see how you see that difference. Because I know when we listen in, I know what you're talking about, but I wonder if the others listening in who aren't knowledgeable about the department understand when you say facilities, does that mean both juvenile halls and the camp setting? What's the difference between detention and residential treatment? It was my experience, and during my career, there were two fundamentally different kind of things, but they seem to be more under one umbrella now. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And we haven't conducted any of the annual inspections in the juvenile halls as of yet. We did a pre-inspection at Los Padrinos, but it was before there were any youth there, a very different purpose. But in the past, I think there have been remarkable differences between the camp settings, the placement setting, and the juvenile hall settings. So you certainly will see and hear that in our future presentations. Sarah, did you want to say anything more about that? Okay, we're going to go on to Maria Skelton. Maria, you're unmuted.
Hear me?
We can.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and I thank you for this meeting. I deal with a lot of celebrities that helped me do what I do, and that's helping reentry people. The celebrities that I deal with are actors, rappers, anything that you can think of. The one that TMZ always follows. Since I do a lot of helping reentry people, one thing that we wanted to do, and that was a little bit right before COVID hit, we were planning on traveling to different schools, talking about the opiate use and drug use. We're willing to do something with the probation department. I have said this in front of a lot of other political people, and they say they want to help the kids, and we're there. We want to go there. We want to help. Maybe, and we know sometimes our young kids don't hear it from us as the parent, but they may say, oh yeah, I'll do it now because this rapper said, it's like, wait, listen to your mom and dad. But whatever we can do to reach that child, let's do it. I have a huge team that's willing to go anywhere and willing to speak to the kids, but it seemed like a lot of people want to, and they say that they want to, but when it comes down, when I call their office, is, oh, we get back to you. So I'm just putting it out there. My email did come up when I registered, so I hope someone would reach out to me, and let's have a sit down and see what we could do and bring some laughter, whether if it's every 3 months a comedy show, something to where the kids will be able to look forward to. So maybe they'll be good. Like, oh, in 3 months I'm gonna see such and such. So let's try it, and I'm willing to help. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for coming to the meeting today. We'll go next to Joseph. Joseph, you're unmuted. You can begin. Oh, actually, I think, yeah, there we go.
Hi, good afternoon. I've been able to go inside a few times, and one key thing that's important, and I'm glad it's in conversation, is relationship and consistency. And those are two things that are vital to. I mean, we're human beings are social creatures by nature, and a lot of our youth don't come from the best social environments, so those those things are really key, and like, just seeing, like I've seen some staff build rapport with the youth, but I've also heard that is not consistent. Sometimes the staff doesn't know what unit they're gonna go to. Sometimes the youth wishes that staff was working this unit instead of that unit. But, and hopefully, it gets to a place where, consistency is able to like take place, where it's the same staff, it's the same, like when I was in juvenile hall, I remembered like it was just kind of like clockwork, we had moving pieces every day. We knew what our day was like. We knew, Mr. Joseph was coming on shift this weekend. We knew, get it together because this staff is coming this weekend, and but it helped us on the inside, with the consistency. But yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Joseph. That's actually all the hands we have raised, Chair Jackson. If anybody else would like to make a comment, we'd love to hear from you.
I'll
Raise your
just-
hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of time left, so we certainly invite people to offer more public comment if they have any. And it looks like someone just raised their hand. I'd like to make this comment first because in having this conversation today and thinking about my experience as a commissioner, and more importantly, my experience in some of these facilities, my firsthand experience, I'm going to borrow Commissioner Kakani's word and just say it is pretty tragic, especially when we're talking about the lack of programming, because I truly believe that my experience in the halls and the reason why I had a positive outcome was because of programming. I was a participant in the Inside Outriders program that really helped me sort of positively channel the frustrations I had around my case. And it just helped me sort of just be creative in a way that helped me process traumatic experiences. And at the time, I was also participating in this thing that they call the Academic Bowl, where the different juvenile halls compete in this academic debate about a topic. At the time, it was the disenfranchisement of men, and I think what the youth are really lacking are opportunities to realize potential, to hone leadership, to develop themselves personally. So when we talk about the lack of programming, that's what's on the line, them coming home and not having that real opportunity to change themselves and not having someone there to help facilitate that personal transformation. And so it is certainly tragic when we talk about this idle time and the real missed opportunity to change some of these young people's lives, because I know that there's so much untapped potential in there. So yeah, it's to say that it's sad is just really an understatement. But on to public participant, Damon.
Sure. Okay, Damon, we're going to unmute you and you can get started, but not yet. Damon, you may need to accept the unmute request. There you go. You can begin.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's good to be back in this space. Used to participate with layup considerably while I was at USC, and have had to focus on some other things, but it's something that I've missed doing. In listening to some of the conversation here, an experience was brought to mind when I was at Camp Barty Flats, which was one of the probation camps back in the day. And I remember one time, now this was just a one-off thing, but one time a gentleman came that was, we'll call him an alumni of Barty Flats, who had a real success story. I mean, to me at the time, because I was really not up to anything any good, but he was a helicopter mechanic, and that seemed very inspirational to me. And we all need mentoring, even the least troubled of us as youth. And but there's nothing more impactful than a mentor that's been where where you've been and has succeeded. I know there's some of that, and we've talked a lot about that in my time in my internship at through USC. I heard a lot about credible messengers and so on and so forth. But this is a little bit maybe different, but in connecting some of these youth that are populating our camps or the halls and bringing back people who have had success stories, I think sounds like a really good inspirational, motivational idea that could help them to see what can be through people like me, for instance. So that's all I had to offer.
Thank you very much, Damon. I appreciate that. Thanks for joining the meeting. Next is Danita Beauchamp. Welcome back, Danita. We're unmuting you. You may need to also unmute yourself. Okay. I
Commission.
think we can, yeah, we can hear
Thank you
you now.
for having this. I'm sorry? They can hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead, Danita.
Thank you for having this meeting. I would like to say that I think as a previous, as he referred to alumni, as the previous caller referred to as alumni, or participant from Los Padrinos, I think safety is one of the biggest factors that inhibits some of them, the students or people, from participating in programs in fear of being bullied or being made fun of, and having these people already have low self-esteem and identity issues. And so I think safety is one of the things, I think, not from just a physical standpoint, but from you know, the outlash and you know, the way that people are spoken about. If the programming is there, they don't necessarily participate in it because they're afraid of what their friends are going to say about them, or and it just contributes to the depression and anxiety that they are already experiencing in a place like that. And so I know when I was at Los Padrinos, I did experience some of that, but I felt safe enough that it didn't prevent me from participating. Unfortunately, I know that is a factor in today's world. So I think maybe focusing on a way for kids to participate in these programs that will help them with their experience once they leave these facilities to reintegrate into society and be productive people of society. And like the gentleman who spoke before me, have people who have success stories share with them that it can be done. And because these people obviously don't have quote role models or mentors the way that other people do. So I just think that would be something to consider in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danita. We'll go next to Kent. Okay, Kent, you're good to go.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. Here, Ken Mendoza with Anti-Recidivism Coalition. Just want to uplift everything that has been said around the programming and support. I just wanted to share a couple of stories. I know that when I was in Bridge in Juvenile Hall, I remember there was a time where, I don't know, Probation or who, Laco had partnered with Quicksilver, and I remember they had done like a competition about clonings, and I remember I was one of the leading competitors. And I think that those types of experiences would made me feel humane, like a student, like someone that actually mattered. Just in that 2-3 days that they were in the company, it was like a one-time thing, I think. But I feel like that really got me triggered. I remember after that, I was so into this topic about cloning chips that I was educating my other fellows in that compound at that time. But that was just like a temporary feeling. But I think those are the things that we need, because at that moment, I remember really getting into this education thing, but it stopped once they left, and once it was back to reality, once we back to the unit. And same when I was in Challenger Memorial Youth Center in Camp Scobie. I remember, despite not having real education, we used to just do packages and copy and paste, and just that's how we get credited. There were times when art was a really strong component. I remember we had a session where we did paintings, and I remember I painted like a mammoth, and they liked the mammoth painting that they posted on the hallway of the Challenger Memorial Youth Center. What I'm trying to get to is like, I feel like these are the types of things that make us feel more humane and make us, process our trauma in a way that we really don't know that we're processing it. When I was in the compound, another thing that really helped me was also reading books. I was also part of the Inside Our Writers program, and despite not really being a positive participants and sometimes getting into fights when I would be in those classes, it did still benefit me because it allowed me to, cope with my feelings. So I would say that, and also support credible messengers. Seeing people that have successfully made it is really inspiring for people who are inside. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kent.
I can definitely picture you doing cloning classes for your colleagues, Kent.
Painting the mammoth.
Okay, we'll have to have him do a special town hall on the cloning meeting. That would be great. Thank you, Kent, as always. Rebecca, you're up next. Okay, you're good.
Okay, so my name is Rebecca. I'm the program manager with Arts for Healing and Justice Network. And I really appreciate the two comments before me because I feel like we're drinking the same juice or whatever. But I want to uplift that there's been a lot of like individual organizations speaking about the services they provide. And, one of the privileges I have being with the network is that I get to work with all of them. And there's no shortage of programming that wants to be offered from community-based organizations. The problem I run into as a program manager and as a coordinator is that communication I have with probation does not make it through to the rest of the facility. And oftentimes that will inhibit our programming from happening. So we have teachers arriving and being turned away because the staff doesn't even know what the schedule is supposed to be. So there's this major communication breakdown that often happens, even though there are ample people eager and happy to go inside and provide programming. And then the other piece around having a caring adult present, I think it's important to have the providers who are teaching the classes, whether that is workforce development or that is arts programming. And we've heard a lot of feedback about the incredible impact arts programming has. That would lead me to LP, so I'll pause that thought. But getting buy-in from the PO officers who understand what the programs are and understand why they're important and who can participate with the young people and encourage the young people to also participate, that will help to create the safety because they see not only are there teachers here who care, but the staff also cares and they think there's value in what's being provided. So there needs to be a more comprehensive, we're working together to support our youth. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. And I will say there have been some recent changes in probation leadership over folks that are looking into the programming. And I am certainly going to send them a copy of this recording and ask them to take a listen to the folks who are offering their services, and also that comment that you just made, Rebecca, about some of the challenges to offering those services. So hopefully that can be one of the outcomes of this meeting. That would be fantastic. Next up, we have Yasmin Imani. You are unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Apologies because I'm driving to go pick my daughter up from summer camp, but hello everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Yasmin Imani McMorrin. I'm currently the Director of Ed Equity for the Children's Defense Fund California, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on this call and hear some of the perspectives from the commissioners who were able to go into the camps and halls and kind of witness what has been going on with our young people that are currently a part of the system. I definitely would just want to amplify the fact that we should be doing all things with young people at the center, with their voices, their needs, their concerns, their education at the center of what we're doing. And I also just want to offer up, I know in the past, which predates my time with CDF, but there were freedom schools, or at least one freedom school that was at a camper hall maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I believe Lakeco supported the facilitation of this program. I know that CDE is really doing a big push in the next couple of weeks to support Freedom Schools. It's a national culturally responsive curriculum that has been proven to improve test scores, particularly of Black and Brown youth. So I just wanted to plug that in this conversation of thinking about how we can engage and make sure that the programming is responsive and providing care and education to our young people. So just wanted to amplify that, and happy to connect with folks further on that if necessary. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks so much, Yasmin Amani. Also, I think Sarah has a question in writing. Sarah, do you have that in front of you? I think if not, I'll read it, but I'm also going to read another question from the chat that says, it's from Benjamin Acosta, and it says, has the POC thought of visiting the facilities during non-business hours, holidays, and weekends to fully understand the issues that occur instead of scheduled visits? So I will share, and actually I'll ask Commissioner Mundo to share a little bit about this as well, that so we do these inspections that Sarah reported on today as fully scheduled, planned visits. That's very intentional because we want them to be ready for us and provide the documentation and be able to see the things we want to see and have that be the official inspection. However, commissioners do conduct regular, either announced or unannounced, unofficial inspections throughout the year. In fact, I think just this week we've had, I know because I was with the commissioner at Los Padrinos on Wednesday, and then there was another commissioner there on Friday, and then another on Saturday, and I believe Commissioner Mundo was also there last week. So that's just one facility in 1 week. And the commissioners are regularly going to the facilities unannounced and occasionally during non-business hours. I believe you've done that. Yes, Commissioner Mundo?
Yes, I actually inadvertently was at Los Padrinos the day that the gun was found. And they were gracious, they were nice enough to let me walk in and see things. It was unexpected and it was really a bad day to be there. But so I did get to see some things, and I did write an email to the management expressing some concerns I had. I also actually go to court venues and sit in the hallways and talk to the families of youth that are being served by probation, just to get an idea of how they feel about the services they're getting in the field. I visited Camp Rocky one morning unannounced and was able to walk through and left alone actually to walk and talk to staff and talk to kids. So hopefully when it gets a little cooler, these 100-degree days it's hard to be out there, but I know that my colleagues really like the idea of unannounced visits, and as we get more stability with the hall and everything that's going around, I'm sure that more of the commissioners will be out there.
Thank you. And yeah, I actually really appreciate that question because there are a lot of things that the commissioners attempt to do, I think I would say behind the scenes. So in their role as commissioners, not in the public meetings, to be able to bring about some of the necessary reform and bring attention to things that need changing without including the putting them on an agenda in a public meeting with the goal of actually seeing improvements and reforms at the facilities. So Sarah, I'll read this question to you. It says, do any of these young people have an individualized education plan, an IEP? Are any of them regional center clients? And then also, are the youth connected to social workers or school counselors at schools they will be attending when they leave the facility?
So I don't have the exact data on how many youth had an IEP from these inspections, but I would say it's safe to say that many do. I would also say there may be clients of regional center. So I'm just trying to think about the math of how many youth were in the facilities that we inspected. It's more than 100. So I would say there probably are some youth that have regional center and probably, services that go along with that. their case, so that I can see the chat, Wendy. So if so,
The
their
other
case
question
coordinator-
was, are they connected to a social worker or school counselor at the school they will be attending when they leave the facility?
Not to my knowledge. They are, while they are in the facility, they are connected with Department of Mental Health and those services delivered through the Department of Mental Health Juvenile Justice Division. But we don't have data about what the process is for a warm handoff, right? I think I have a lot of questions and concerns about that. But for the purposes of the inspections, we just take the snapshot of the day, and I didn't come across any data or any interviews with youth that really said like, I'm going home soon and this is the plan. Actually, let me take that back. I had a really great conversation. I don't know if Commissioner Mundo had a conversation with a youth that talked about this as well. But I did have one conversation with a youth that was planning to be going home from Dorothy Kirby Center. And in our conversation, one thing that was really an emphasis for him was maintaining sobriety and maintaining some of the gains that he had made within the substance abuse services that he had. And we talked about that quite a bit. But he didn't have a plan for a provider when he went out, as far as he knew. So I think maybe Commissioner Mundo can speak a little bit to what happens when youth get released, but we didn't gather anything that tells us about a warm handoff during this inspection.
So theoretically, if you're in camp, you have an MDT, and that usually includes the services or key people that are going to wait for that warm handoff. So theoretically, there's a system for that in the camps. The juvenile halls are detention centers, or the juvenile hall is the detention center. And so there's really it's difficult to assess when a youth is going to be released from the hall, depending on their case. And with IEPs, the one thing I've learned is that a kid that's in our system is more likely to get an IEP than a kid that's out in the neighborhood. Because a kid in our system will have a public defender or an attorney making sure that and pushing that. It's surprising how many kids I had under my supervision that started their IEPs when they were ensnared by the probation system, and who were just basically pushed around and pushed away at regular schools because IEPs come with a significant cost. I don't know the percentage of kids that have IEP, but I know that someone who's worked in the educational system and seen firsthand in the field, see how many parents complain about the IEPs not being executed while their kids were at home. And then with regional center, every kid that comes into the juvenile hall is screened for regional center. And at my time over intake, there was a handful of kids that actually were active to the regional center, and they're identified. I just can't tell you how many.
The only thing I would add to this conversation is that while I haven't spoken to youth directly about it, I have had extensive conversations with LACO, the LA County Office of Education, who runs the schools, and their special education program is thorough, as Eduardo mentions, and has identified many of the youth in the programs. They also have a reentry program in particular the East Camps that I have witnessed the packets and the process by which they do that. So hopefully the youth are being, there is a warm handoff from the school setting, if not from the provider and mental health setting. So they do a very clear job of making sure they know where the youth is intending to enroll when they go out. But I'm not sure. I think as Sarah mentions, there isn't as much clarity on that process on the mental health providers side and just kind of like other wraparound services. Is that fair, Sarah? Okay, that's all the questions that we have received. And I don't see any more hands raised unless anybody else wants to make a comment. That would be very unlike us, Chair Jackson, to end right on time and maybe even a few minutes early. I will share, Chair Jackson had a lovely idea that I'm very excited about, which is for us to hold a town hall in the upcoming weeks and actually, now that I say this, it may end up not being a town hall. We'll have to figure out how to do that. We may have to do it as an in-person meeting where we invite commissioners who have spent a significant amount of time in the facilities to reflect on that, not from an inspections perspective, but from a personal experience perspective of being in the halls and camps. I think it's such a great idea because when I first met with our liaison from BSCC, her indication to us was that what we could do best in our inspections process is have commissioners go to the facilities and look at the facilities from a very personal perspective. How would this feel if I was in this facility? How would this feel if my child or my niece or nephew was in this facility? How would I feel if I worked in this facility? And that personalized perspective is actually the best thing that we can contribute to both the Board of Supervisors and the BSCC. So I think we can share some of those feelings from commissioners' perspectives in a town hall format. I do see one more hand that came up. Commissioner Jackson, can we take that comment?
I'd love to hear from Eddie, yes.
Okay, great. So we've got Eddie Ramirez. Looks like you're unmuted already.
Thank you. My name is Eddie Central Cha, and I apologize because I'm out here in the field right now at an event. But I was wondering if when the students come in, do they get assessed for like their needs, like mental health needs, but also more forward if staff notices that something's going on with that student, do they reassess them, and do they have like conversation maybe with that staff that that student felt comfortable with, so they could be reassessed to see what kind of needs, like mentally, or if they need an IEP or that kind of help.
Definitely a question for Sarah or Eduardo or both.
So I'll start with the mental health piece. So as soon as a youth has entered a facility like a juvenile hall facility, within 3 days, they are given a beginning of an assessment called a MAZE. It's like a little questionnaire where they talk about, it kind of asks about recent symptoms over the last month or 3 months. It's been a while since I've administered one, so you'll have to excuse me. And depending on the results of that little questionnaire, if I think a couple of questions are answered with a yes, or it seems like any sort of symptomology is being experienced, the mental health staff will receive a mental health referral, right? And so then they'll come out and do a full assessment and see if there's going to be like a chart opened, right? So then the youth would be on somebody's caseload. Likewise, if a youth, answers all the questions, no. But within the coming days, staff are noticing that things are not working out, or there's a depressed mood, or any kind of mood stuff, or maybe they're not getting along really well, or they're having a really, really hard time adjusting. There's a method for putting in like a mental health referral, and then there would be another assessment, right? So there is a process of kind of constantly checking in on youth, even those youth that may at the beginning have not wanted services, they may come to change their minds. So there's a follow-up on that. Eduardo, do you want to take the other part?
No, that's exactly what happens with all youth that come in at admissions.
And then I don't know if there was part of the question that was about assessing for educational stuff. I don't believe there is an immediate process upon entry for that. But I would assume that any records would be shared. I don't actually have a ton of information about that, but I think if youth need a referral to be assessed for that, I think a lot of times referrals come from the youth's attorneys to get those processes started. I hope that's a satisfactory answer. If not, somebody chip in here and help me out.
Yeah, no, I can add to that. I'm because most of the early assessments happen in the juvenile hall. So, and I can't imagine that they don't do some short assessment when they start assigning a child to a classroom or a youth. So.
Okay, we have Krista Newble has raised her hand. Krista, you're unmuted.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just had a question in regards to the education. I'm just curious if at some point you guys are going to call LACO to the carpet about the quality of work that they're providing and the package and actually discussing that, because I've been a part of this for a while and I've been listening and chiming in, and I did see when LACO was here and their stellar presentation and everything, but nobody spoke about the actual work that they're giving and the teaching style and if they're really teaching. And I normally do not agree with Kakani, but I have to agree with her on the work part, which is shocking to me, that I agree with her. But like, at what point is LACO going to be called to the carpet? At what point and really have to provide what they're giving and show these packets and show what's happening and their teaching styles and actually teaching? Because a lot of things carry over on probation, even on some of the criticism that's given, and you guys at times, not everyone, bunch it all up in one. But people forget that these are contracts through the county that probation is using, and some of these things, probation, DMH, the nurses, these are all individual contracts, although they fall under probation. So at what point do we bring some of these other things up and speak to those entities instead of just piling it all on probation? Thank you.
Thank you, Krista.
You know, I'd like to just jump on that because it's broader than just LACO, which isn't a contract. It's actually a provider in the county. It's a county provider with the Department of Mental Health. But I think it boils down to the board also, because the difficulty of providing an equitable education to youth in these settings is 1,000 times magnified in some of your most challenged neighborhoods, because you don't have classrooms set up with kids that have been going along a process at the same rate. I mean, one day you're talking to a kid who reads at a first grade level, and the next day you have somebody one of the few kids that reads at an 11th grade level. And in between that, you have such a variety of levels, and it requires a lot more funding so everybody gets an education there, and a lot more teachers and smaller classrooms, and LACO can only do so much of that. And so for me, I mean, if we're going to use these institutions as a county, then we should really put the resources into it, so LACO won't have excuses, or probation won't have excuses, or the Department of Mental Health won't have excuses, because they're severely all underfunded if we're trying to reach certain goals.
We've got one more hand, and I think that should be it. Chair Jackson, if that works for you, so we can get out of here on time. It's Claudia Valladares. Claudia.
Yes, let's shrink it to 1 minute, Wendy, just because we've hit the time.
Okay, Claudia,
can you hurt? No, 2 minutes is fine. She's the last person. 2 minutes is fine.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me this time. I just really wanted to piggyback off of what he said. I think it is unreasonable to expect the staff at the centers to do all of this work when they don't have the time or the resources or the funding for that matter. But if you were to maybe create a collaborative or invite all of the different stakeholders to come in and visit, that would relieve some of the work that they would have to do, and it would bring in the experts the kids need. So that's why I brought up regional center, because every kid who has an IEP already and is a client of regional center already has an expert to help, because they're getting written up for looking the wrong way and things like that. And I can just imagine a lot of the students that are on the spectrum for autism, for example, having difficulty following some of these rules or even understanding what the impact of getting written up is. But if we had all of these different stakeholders at the table discussing the issues and the needs and the resources, then I think we could accomplish a lot more for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's our last. Okay, thanks everyone. And then we appreciate everyone who has contributed to public comment today and everyone who's presented, especially the comment that was made by, everyone said something really great today, but I liked what Yasmin said earlier about the importance of keeping youth-centered in all that we do. And of course, that is our guiding principle as a POC member, and as a lot of stakeholders that are here charged with doing this work. In fact, I envision facilities that have programming or programs that are run by youth in some way. You know, if we want to sort of equip them with leadership tools and things like that, there are great opportunities for them to be educated on the importance of leadership and give them real opportunity to kind of take charge in situations where there may be shortages, or, you know, just an opportunity for them to stand in those gaps. But now is the time for us to close things out here, and we certainly look forward to carrying over some of this discussion to our upcoming or a later POC meeting, especially the educational piece. Wendy, I think we should definitely agendize education, the quality of it, and sort of talk about we talked about reactivating our stakeholder meetings, where LACO is certainly going to be at that table, but we should do some more strategizing around what we'd like to see come of those meetings, and then bring that to the forefront in a POC meeting. But I'm going to close everything out. I certainly appreciate everyone for joining us today. Our next commission meeting is on Thursday, August 10th at St. Anne's. Wait, hold on. Wait. Okay. Sorry, someone just barged in and did something that was really wacky. Our next meeting is on Thursday, August 10th at St. Anne's Events and Conference Center at 9 a.m. We would love to see all participants there. You can find the registration details on our website at poc.lacounty.gov/meetings. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day. Bye-bye.